The iron chains bit into Zara Donovan's wrists as she stood on the wooden platform in the center of Fargo, Dakota Territory, feeling the scorching July sun of 1878 beat down on her bare shoulders while men shouted numbers that would determine whether she lived or died. Her dress was torn and filthy from 3 weeks of travel in a cramped wagon. Her dark hair hung in tangled waves around her face, and her green eyes burned with a mixture of rage and terror as she watched the crowd of men below assess her like cattle. The auctioneer, a fat man named Gunderson with tobacco stains on his vest, gripped her arm and turned her in a slow circle so the bidders could see all of her. She wanted to spit in his face, to scream, to fight, but the chains held her steady, and the rifle-carrying guards on either side of the platform made resistance pointless. "Look at this one, gentlemen," Gunderson called out, his voice carrying across the dusty street. "Young, strong, pretty as a picture. She can cook, clean, and work a field. Starting bid is $50. Zara's stomach twisted. She had been traveling west with her father from Pennsylvania, hoping to start a new life after her mother died of consumption. They had made it as far as the Dakota Territory when their small wagon train was attacked by bandits. Her father had been shot trying to protect her, and she had been taken along with 3 other women. The bandits had sold them to Gunderson, who made his money trafficking in human misery under the pretense of legal indenture contracts. The bidding started slowly. A rancher in a dusty hat offered $60. A saloon owner countered with $70. Zara felt bile rise in her throat as she imagined the life that awaited her in a saloon, serving drinks to drunken men who would see her as property to be used and discarded. Then a voice cut through the crowd, clear and firm. $500. The crowd went silent. Zara's eyes snapped to the source of the voice and found a tall man standing at the edge of the gathering. He wore a dark hat pulled low over his face, a long duster coat despite the heat, and a holstered revolver on his hip. He stepped forward into the light, and she could see he was younger than most of the bidders, perhaps in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and intense blue eyes that seemed to look right through the chains and the dirt to see the person beneath. Gunderson's eyes went wide with greed. 500. Did you all hear that? We have $500. Do I hear 6? The crowd murmured, but no one spoke. $500 was more than most men made in a year. The stranger walked through the parted crowd and climbed the steps to the platform. Up close, Zara could see a scar running along his jaw and the weariness in his eyes that spoke of hard years lived fast. He pulled out a leather pouch and counted out the money into Gunderson's eager hands. "She is yours, mister." Gunderson paused, waiting for a name. "Smith," the stranger said flatly. "Wade Smith." Gunderson pocketed the money and gestured to one of his guards. "Remove the chains and give Mr. Smith the papers." The guard unlocked the heavy iron cuffs, and Zara felt her arms drop to her sides, weak from being held in position for so long. Her wrists were raw and bleeding where the metal had rubbed her skin. She swayed on her feet, dizzy from standing in the sun without water for hours. Wade Smith caught her elbow before she fell. His touch was surprisingly gentle. "Easy," he said quietly, his voice meant only for her. "I've got you." Gunderson handed him a rolled piece of paper. Her indenture contract, 7 years of service or until the debt is paid, all legal and binding. Wade took the paper without looking at it and guided Zara down the platform steps. The crowd was already dispersing, disappointed by the quick end to the entertainment. Zara's legs trembled as she walked, but she forced herself to stay upright. She would not show weakness, not now, not ever again. Wade led her to a black horse tied to a hitching post outside the general store. He pulled a canteen from his saddlebag and offered it to her. "Drink," he said. Zara hesitated, then grabbed the canteen and drank deeply. The water was warm and tasted of metal, but it was the most wonderful thing she had felt in days. She drank until Wade gently pulled the canteen away. "Not too fast or you will be sick," he said. He pulled out a handkerchief and wet it with water from the canteen, then reached for her wrists. "May I?" she nodded, too exhausted to speak. He carefully cleaned the blood from her wrists, his movements practiced and efficient. She studied his face as he worked. He had strong features, a straight nose and a mouth set in a grim line. There was something about him that did not match the other men who had been bidding. Those men had looked at her with hunger or calculation. Wade Smith looked at her with something that might have been compassion. "Thank you," she finally whispered. He glanced up at her, and for a moment something flickered in his blue eyes. "Do not thank me yet." He finished cleaning her wrists and tied the handkerchief around the worst of the wounds. Then he untied his horse and began leading it down the street. Zara followed because she had nowhere else to go. They walked past the saloon where piano music drifted through the swinging doors, past the sheriff's office where a deputy sat sleeping in a chair, past the bank and the hotel and the undertaker's parlor. At the edge of town, Wade stopped at a small stable. He spoke briefly with the owner and emerged a few minutes later leading a brown mare. He handed the reins to Zara. "You can ride?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Her father had taught her when she was a girl. "Good, we have a long way to go." He helped her mount the horse, and she settled into the saddle with a wince. Every muscle in her body ached. Wade mounted his own horse and turned it west, toward the open prairie that stretched endlessly under the vast blue sky. They rode in silence for hours. Zara had no idea where they were going or what Wade Smith intended to do with her. The sun moved across the sky, and the town of Fargo disappeared behind them. The landscape was beautiful in a stark, unforgiving way. Tall grass rippled in the wind like waves on a green ocean, and the horizon seemed impossibly far away. As the sun began to sink toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Wade finally slowed his horse. They had reached a small creek lined with cottonwood trees. He dismounted and began unsaddling his horse. "We will camp here tonight," he said. Zara slid off her horse, her legs nearly buckling when her feet hit the ground. She steadied herself against the mare's warm flank and watched as Wade efficiently set up camp. He built a small fire, filled a pot with water from the creek, and pulled supplies from his saddlebags. Within minutes, coffee was brewing and beans were heating in a pan. She sat on a flat rock near the fire and watched him work. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had spent most of his life outdoors. When the food was ready, he handed her a tin plate and a spoon. "Eat," he said. She ate because her body demanded it, though she could barely taste the food. When she finished, she set the plate down and finally asked the question that had been burning in her mind all day. "Why did you buy me?" Wade was cleaning his own plate with a handful of grass. He stopped and looked at her across the fire. The flames reflected in his blue eyes, making them look almost golden. "Because no woman deserves to be sold like that," he said simply. "But $500, she said. "That is a fortune," he shrugged. "It is only money. What do you want from me?" He understood what she was really asking. "Nothing. Tomorrow morning I am going to give you a choice. You can take that mare and ride wherever you want to go, or you can come with me to my ranch. If you come, I will give you work, a fair wage, and a safe place to live. No chains, no indenture, no obligations beyond honest work for honest pay." Zara stared at him, searching his face for signs of deception. "Why would you do that?" Wade was quiet for a long moment. He pulled the indenture contract from his coat pocket and held it up so she could see it. Then, Deliberately, he tore it in half and threw the pieces into the fire. They caught immediately, curling and blackening as the flames consumed them. "Because I know what it is like to not have a choice," he said, "and because it is the right thing to do." Zara watched the paper burn, watched 7 years of forced servitude turn to ash. Something inside her chest loosened, some tight knot of fear she had been carrying since the bandits took her. Tears blurred her vision, and she wiped them away angrily. "I do not even know where to go," she admitted. "My father is dead. I have no family, no money, nowhere to return to." "Then come to the ranch," Wade said. "At least until you figure out what you want to do." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak. That night, she lay wrapped in a blanket Wade had given her, staring up at more stars than she had ever seen in her life. She could hear Wade on the other side of the fire, his breathing slow and steady. Despite everything that had happened, despite the horror of the past weeks, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. They rose with the sun and continued west. As they rode, Wade began to talk, filling the silence with stories about the land and the ranch. He told her he had been working as a cowboy since he was 15, saving every penny he could. 3 years ago, he had bought a small piece of land with a creek running through it and had been building it up ever since. He ran cattle and horses, and he had 3 other men who worked for him. "It is not much yet," he said, "but it is mine. Earned through sweat and hard work, not taken from anyone else." Zara found herself drawn into his stories. He spoke with a quiet pride about his ranch, about the first calf born on his land, about the house he was building log by log. As he talked, she began to see him more clearly. He was a man who had pulled himself up from nothing through sheer determination, who valued freedom and honesty above all else. On the second day of travel, they stopped at a trading post to buy supplies. Wade insisted on buying her a proper riding outfit, boots that fit, and a hat to keep the sun off her face. He also bought her a bedroll, soap, and a brush for her tangled hair. When the trader tried to shortchange him, Wade calmly pointed out the error, his hand resting casually on his revolver. The trader quickly corrected his mathematics. As they rode away from the trading post, Zara said, "You did not have to buy me all those things." "You needed them," Wade said, as if that explained everything. They reached the ranch on the 3rd day, just as the sun was setting. Zara saw it first as a dark shape against the golden sky. Then details emerged. A sturdy log house with a covered porch, a barn and several outbuildings, corrals holding horses and cattle, and beyond it all, rolling grassland that seemed to go on forever. 3 men emerged from the barn as they rode up. Wade introduced them as Tom, a grizzled man in his 50s who had worked cattle all his life; Miguel, a quiet Mexican cowhand with kind eyes; and Pete, a young man barely out of his teens with freckles and an easy smile. "This is Zara Donovan," Wade said. "She will be working here same as everyone else. She gets the small cabin, fair wages, and respect. Anyone who has a problem with that can collect their pay and leave now." The 3 men glanced at each other, then at Zara. Tom touched his hat brim. "Welcome to the ranch, miss." The small cabin Wade had mentioned was actually a 1-room structure made of rough-hewn logs, with a wood stove, a bed, a table, and a chair. It was simple but clean, and after weeks of sleeping on the ground or in a wagon, it looked like a palace to Zara. "There is a pump outside for water," Wade said, standing in the doorway. "We eat together in the main house at sunrise and sunset. If you need anything, just ask." "Thank you," Zara said, "for everything." Wade nodded and turned to leave, then paused. "Zara, I meant what I said. You are free to go whenever you want. This is not a prison." "I know," she said softly. "That is why I am staying." The next morning, Zara discovered that Wade had not been exaggerating about the work. There were chickens to feed, eggs to collect, vegetables to tend in the garden, meals to cook for 5 hungry people, and endless cleaning to be done. She threw herself into the tasks with determination, grateful to have something to do besides think about what she had lost. The men treated her with distant politeness at first, unsure of what to make of her. But as the days passed and they saw that she was willing to work hard without complaint, they began to warm to her. Tom taught her how to milk the cow. Miguel showed her which plants growing wild near the creek were edible and which were poisonous. Pete entertained her with exaggerated stories about his adventures that made her laugh for the first time in weeks. Wade remained more distant than the others. He was up before dawn and often did not return until after dark, riding the range with his men, checking on cattle, mending fences, doing the 1,000 tasks required to keep a ranch running. But Zara found herself watching for him, noticing when he came in tired and dusty, feeling a small flutter in her chest when he smiled at something Tom said. She told herself it was gratitude, nothing more. He had saved her from a terrible fate, given her freedom and safety. Of course, she felt drawn to him. It did not mean anything. But as the weeks passed and summer deepened into August, she began to realize she was lying to herself. It was the small things that caught her attention. The way Wade always made sure she had enough to eat before filling his own plate. The way he asked her opinion about ranch matters, actually listening to her answers. The way he had quietly left a thick coat hanging on the cabin door when the nights started turning cool, never mentioning it, but making sure she had what she needed. And there were moments when she would look up from her work to find him watching her with an expression she could not quite read, something between wonder and sadness. He would always look away quickly, but not before she felt a warmth spread through her entire body. One evening in late August, Zara was carrying water from the creek when she heard shouting from the main house. She hurried up the path and found Wade and Tom standing in the yard, looking toward the east where a column of smoke rose into the sky. "Fire," Tom said grimly. "That is coming from the direction of the Paulson Ranch." Wade was already moving toward the barn. "Saddle up." Pete grabbed the buckets and shovels. "Tom, you stay here with Zara in case the fire spreads this way." "I am coming with you," Zara said. Wade turned to her. "It is too dangerous." "You will need all the help you can get," she insisted. "I can ride and I am not afraid of hard work." She saw him hesitate, saw the worry in his eyes, but also the recognition that she was right. "Stay close to me," he finally said. They rode hard toward the smoke, and as they got closer, Zara could see flames leaping from the dry grass. The Paulson Ranch was a smaller operation than Wade's, run by a widow named Sarah Paulson and her 2 teenage sons. By the time they arrived, half the prairie around the house was burning, and Sarah and her boys were frantically trying to save what they could. What followed was hours of brutal, exhausting work. They beat at the flames with wet blankets, dug trenches to stop the fire's spread, and hauled bucket after bucket of water from the well. The heat was intense, the smoke choking. Zara's eyes streamed with tears and her throat burned, but she kept working alongside the men. At one point, a sudden shift in the wind sent flames racing toward where Sarah Paulson was standing. Without thinking, Zara ran forward and grabbed the woman, pulling her back just before the fire reached them. They fell together in a tangle of skirts and ash, coughing and gasping. Wade was there in an instant, helping them both to their feet. "Are you hurt?" he demanded, his hands on Zara's shoulders, his face tight with fear. "I am fine," she managed to say between coughs. He pulled her close for just a moment, his arms around her, and she felt his heart pounding against her cheek. Then he released her and turned back to fighting the fire. It was nearly midnight when they finally got the fire under control. The Paulson family had lost their barn and several acres of grazing land, but the house was saved. Sarah Paulson thanked them with tears streaming down her soot-covered face. The ride back to the ranch was slow and quiet. Everyone was too exhausted to talk. Zara swayed in her saddle, fighting to stay awake. When they reached the ranch, Wade helped her down from her horse. "You should have stayed here where it was safe," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only concern. "Would you have stayed behind if you were me?" she asked. He looked at her for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "No, I suppose I would not have. Then do not expect different from me." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, the first real smile she had seen from him. "You are a stubborn woman, Zara Donovan." "I learned from a stubborn man, Wade Smith." The next morning, Zara woke to find her entire body aching and her hands covered in blisters from the shovel. She forced herself up anyway and went to prepare breakfast. Wade came in just as she was setting out the coffee, and he stopped when he saw her hands. "Let me see," he said. Reluctantly, she held out her hands. He examined them carefully, his calloused fingers gentle on her damaged skin. Then he disappeared into his room and returned with a tin of salve. "My mother used to make this," he said, rubbing the salve into her blisters. "It helps with the healing." "You never talk about your family," Zara said softly. His hands stilled for a moment. "Not much to tell. My father was a drunk who disappeared when I was 10. My mother worked herself to death trying to keep us fed. I had a younger sister." His voice caught slightly. "She died of fever when she was 12. I was 14, working at her ranch 50 miles away. I did not even know she was sick until I came home and found her already buried." "Wade, I am so sorry." He finished with her hands and closed the tin of salve. "It was a long time ago, but I learned something from it. Life is hard enough without people making it harder for each other. When I see someone in trouble, someone who needs help, I help if I can. That is all." "That is not all," Zara said. "What you did for me, buying my freedom, it was more than help. It was a gift I can never repay." Wade looked at her then, really looked at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. "I do not want repayment, Zara. I just want you to be happy." The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken words. Zara felt her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to close the distance between them, to feel his arms around her again like she had during the fire. But before she could move, Tom came through the door, breaking the moment. "Morning," Tom said cheerfully. "Something sure smells good." Wade stepped back and the moment was gone. But as Zara served breakfast, she caught Wade watching her again, and she knew something had changed between them. September arrived with cooler temperatures, and the first hints of gold appearing in the cottonwood leaves. The cattle needed to be moved to winter pasture, which meant long days on horseback for all the men. Zara found herself alone at the ranch more often, which gave her time to think. She had been at the ranch for nearly 2 months now, and she had saved almost every penny Wade paid her. She had enough money to buy a train ticket east if she wanted to return to Pennsylvania. Or she could go to one of the bigger towns, find work as a seamstress or a teacher. She had choices now, real choices. But every time she thought about leaving, her heart ached. The ranch had become home in a way nowhere else had ever been, not even the house where she grew up. And Wade, quiet and hardworking Wade, who had given her freedom and asked for nothing in return, had become far more important to her than she wanted to admit. She was in love with him. The realization hit her one afternoon as she was kneading bread dough and watching him through the window as he worked with a young horse in the corral. She loved the way he moved, confident and sure. She loved his quiet strength, his fundamental decency, the way he treated everyone with respect regardless of their station. She loved the rare smiles he gave her, the way his whole face changed when he laughed at one of Pete's jokes. But did he feel the same way? Sometimes she thought she saw affection in his eyes when he looked at her, but he never spoke of it, never touched her beyond the occasional brush of hands or the helping hand to mount a horse. The annual Harvest Festival was held in Fargo in mid-September, and Tom suggested that everyone go to town for the celebration. "We have been working ourselves to the bone," he argued. "We deserve a day of fun." Wade agreed, though he looked reluctant. Zara suspected he was not much for crowds or celebrations. But the morning they left for town, he surprised her by riding beside her instead of ahead with the other men. "You look nice," he said, gesturing to her dress. It was the first time she had worn anything besides her work clothes since arriving at the ranch, and she had taken extra care with her appearance, brushing her hair until it shone and pinning it up with the pins Wade had bought her at the trading post. "Thank you," she said, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. The festival was everything Tom had promised. The main street of Fargo was decorated with ribbons and banners, and the smell of roasted meat and baked goods filled the air. There were games and contests, music and dancing. Zara found herself caught up in the joy of it, laughing as Pete tried and failed to win a shooting contest, clapping as Miguel showed off his roping skills. But she was always aware of Wade beside her. He stayed close, his presence steady and reassuring in the chaos of the crowd. When a drunk man stumbled into her, Wade was there immediately, his hand on her elbow, guiding her away from trouble. When she admired a pretty shawl at one of the vendor's stalls, he bought it for her over her protests. "You never spend your wages on anything for yourself," he said, draping the shawl around her shoulders. "You deserve something pretty." "Wade, you have already given me so much." "Not enough," he said quietly. "Not nearly enough." Before she could ask what he meant, music started playing in the town square and couples began forming for a dance. Pete immediately asked a pretty girl in a blue dress. Tom partnered with Sarah Paulson, who had come to town with her sons. Miguel was pulled into the dance by a laughing woman Zara did not recognize. Wade stood awkwardly, looking like he wanted to bolt. Zara gathered her courage and held out her hand. "Dance with me." He looked at her hand like it might bite him. "I am not much of a dancer. Neither am I. We can be terrible together." A reluctant smile crossed his face. "When you put it like that, how can I refuse?" He took her hand and they joined the other dancers. The music was lively, a fiddle tune that had everyone spinning and laughing. Wade had not been lying about his dancing skills. He was stiff and uncertain, counting steps under his breath. But he held her hand firmly, and when he looked down at her, his blue eyes were warm. "See, we are not so terrible," Zara said, laughing as they narrowly avoided colliding with another couple. "That is because you are a good partner," Wade said. "You make it easy." The music changed to something slower, and the dancers adjusted, coming closer together. Wade's hand moved to her waist, and Zara placed her hand on his shoulder. They were inches apart now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. "Zara," he said, his voice rough, "there is something I need to tell you." "What is it?" He stopped, searching for words. "From the moment I saw you on that platform, chained but unbroken, angry and scared but still fighting, I knew you were different. Special. These past 2 months, getting to know you, watching you build a life here, it has been. You make everything better. The whole ranch feels different with you in it. I feel different." Zara's heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "Different how?" "Alive," he said simply. "For the first time in years I feel alive, and it is because of you, Wade." "I know I have no right to ask anything of you," he continued. "You have been through hell, and you are just starting to find your feet again, but I need you to know that I care about you, more than I have ever cared about anyone. If you decide to leave, to go somewhere else and start fresh, I will understand. I will help you however I can. But if you stay, if you choose to stay, it will not be as my employee. It will be as my equal, as my partner, as—" he took a deep breath, "as my wife, if you will have me." Zara felt tears spring to her eyes. "You want to marry me?" "I want to spend every day of the rest of my life trying to make you happy," Wade said. "I want to build something real with you, not just a ranch but a home, a family. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep holding you every night. I want to grow old with you and watch the sun set over our land and know that I am the luckiest man who ever lived because you chose me." A tear rolled down her cheek. "You saved my life. You gave me freedom when I had none. You treated me with kindness when I had known only cruelty. How could I not love you?" His eyes widened. "You love me. Yes, you stubborn, wonderful man, I love you. I think I have loved you since the moment you tore up that indenture contract and threw it in the fire." Wade let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. He pulled her close, right there in the middle of the dance floor with everyone watching, and kissed her. His lips were warm and soft, and the kiss was gentle, almost reverent, like he was afraid she might disappear if he held her too tightly. When they finally broke apart, the entire town square erupted in cheers and applause. Tom was grinning like a fool, Miguel was whistling, and Pete was jumping up and down like a child. Even Sarah Paulson was wiping tears from her eyes. Wade laughed, a full, joyous sound that Zara had never heard from him before. He took her hand and raised it high. She said yes. He shouted, and the crowd cheered louder. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch. Sarah Paulson made Zara's dress, a beautiful creation of ivory silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Tom walked her down the makeshift aisle they had created in front of the house, giving her away with tears in his grizzled eyes. The local preacher performed the ceremony while Miguel, Pete, Sarah, and her sons watched. When Wade slipped the simple gold band on her finger, Zara felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was where she was meant to be, with this man who had shown her that love did not have to be earned or bought, that it could be freely given. That night, in the cabin that had been expanded and made beautiful with new furniture and curtains, Wade held her close and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" she asked, tracing the scar on his jaw with her finger. "For choosing to stay. For choosing me. For being brave enough to love again after everything you went through." "We chose each other," Zara said. "That is how it should be." They made love slowly, tenderly, learning each other's bodies and hearts. And afterward, lying wrapped in each other's arms, Zara thought about the journey that had brought her here. The pain and fear and loss had been real, but so was this joy, this love, this new beginning. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, his fingers drawing lazy circles on her shoulder. "How strange life is," she said. 6 months ago, I could not have imagined being here, being this happy. I thought my life was over when those bandits took me, but it was really just beginning." "I was not living before you," Wade said. "I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me what it means to truly be alive." As the weeks turned into months and autumn gave way to winter, Zara settled into her new role as Wade's wife. She took over the management of the household, making improvements and changes that increased the efficiency of the ranch. She also began teaching Miguel and Pete to read and write in the evenings, gathered around the fire in the main house. Wade consulted her on every major decision about the ranch, valuing her opinions and insights. Together, they planned expansions, discussed which cattle to sell and which to keep, and dreamed about the future. Winter in the Dakota Territory was harsh, with snow piling up to the windows and temperatures that could freeze a man solid if he was caught outside too long. But Zara had never been happier. On the coldest nights, she and Wade would lie in bed, wrapped in quilts, talking about everything and nothing. He told her stories about his years as a cowboy, about the places he had seen and the people he had known. She told him about her childhood in Pennsylvania, about her mother's gentle hands and her father's booming laugh. "I wish he could have met you," she said one night. "My father, he would have liked you." "I wish I could have met him too," Wade said, to thank him for raising such an incredible daughter. In February, during a brief warm spell that turned the snow to slush, a rider came to the ranch with news. There had been a trial in Fargo. The bandits who had attacked Zara's wagon train had been caught attempting to rob a stagecoach. During the investigation, their connection to Gunderson's trafficking operation had been discovered. Gunderson and his associates were now in prison, facing serious charges. The territorial governor had declared all indenture contracts obtained through coercion to be invalid and had established a fund to help victims restart their lives. "It is over," Zara said after the rider left. "Truly over." Wade held her as she cried, releasing the last of the fear and anger she had been carrying. When her tears finally stopped, she felt lighter, as if a weight she had not realized she was carrying had been lifted. "You are safe," Wade murmured into her hair. "I will always keep you safe." "I know," she said, "but that is not why I love you. I love you because you gave me the tools to keep myself safe. You did not just save me, Wade. You showed me how to save myself." Spring arrived with a rush of green across the prairie and wildflowers blooming in every direction. The cattle grew fat on fresh grass. New calves were born and the ranch prospered. Wade hired 2 more men to help with the expanded herd, and they began building a larger house to replace the log cabin. In May, Zara realized she was pregnant. She waited until she was certain before telling Wade, choosing a moment when they were alone on the porch, watching the sun set over their land. "Wade," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby." For a moment, he just stared at her, his eyes wide with shock. Then a smile spread across his face, so broad and bright that it transformed him. He let out a whoop of joy and picked her up, spinning her around while she laughed. "Careful, careful," she protested, but she was laughing too hard to sound serious. He set her down gently, then dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead against her stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "This is your father. I promise to love you and protect you and teach you everything I know. And I promise to be better than my father was. You will always know you are loved." Zara ran her fingers through his hair, overwhelmed with emotion. "You are going to be a wonderful father." "I am going to try," he said, looking up at her. "God, Zara, I am so happy I do not even have words for it." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and into the fall. Zara continued to work, though Wade and the other men constantly tried to get her to rest more. She ignored them for the most part, knowing her own body and limits. In late November, as the first serious snow of the season began to fall, Zara went into labor. Sarah Paulson and 2 other women from neighboring ranches came to help, shooing the nervous men out of the house. Wade paced outside for hours, despite the cold, unable to sit still. Tom finally forced him to come into the barn and help with chores, just to keep him from wearing a path in the snow. "I have never been this scared in my life," Wade admitted as he forked hay into a stall. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose her?" "You will not," Tom said firmly. "Zara is strong. She has survived worse than childbirth." "But what if?" "No what ifs," Tom interrupted. "You just have to have faith." As night fell and the stars came out, a thin cry pierced the air. Wade dropped the pitchfork and ran for the house, his heart in his throat. He burst through the door to find Sarah Paulson smiling at him. "Congratulations," she said. "You have a son." Wade barely heard her. He was already moving toward the bedroom, where he found Zara propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. She looked up as he entered, and her smile made his heart skip a beat. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Wade approached slowly, almost reverently. Zara pulled back the blanket to reveal a tiny, red-faced baby with a shock of dark hair. The baby's eyes were squeezed shut and his little fists waved in the air. "He is perfect," Wade breathed. "Can I hold him?" Zara carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Wade held his son with the utmost care, as if he were made of glass. The baby made a small sound, and Wade felt something crack open in his chest. A fierce, overwhelming love unlike anything he had ever experienced. "Hello, little one," he whispered. "I am your papa, and I promise you I will spend every day of my life making sure you know you are loved and wanted and valued. You will never doubt it, not for a single moment." "What should we name him?" Zara asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but had never settled on one. Wade looked down at his son, then at Zara, then out the window at the snow falling softly in the moonlight. "James," he said. "After your father, James Donovan Smith." Tears filled Zara's eyes. He would have been so honored. Wade sat on the edge of the bed, and Zara leaned against his shoulder. Together they watched their son sleep, marveling at the perfection of his tiny fingers and toes, the softness of his skin, the miracle of his existence. "Thank you," Wade said quietly. "For this, for him, for everything. We made him together," Zara said. "This is our gift to each other." The winter that followed was hard, with blizzards and bitter cold that kept them housebound for days at a time. But inside the house there was warmth and light and love. James grew quickly, his cries filling the house at all hours. Wade proved to be a devoted father, getting up for nighttime feedings, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. "You are a natural," Zara told him one night, watching as he rocked their son to sleep. "I just love him so much it makes everything else easy," Wade said. As spring returned and James grew into a chubby, happy baby who smiled at everything, Zara found herself reflecting on how much her life had changed. 2 years ago, she had been chained on an auction block, believing her life was over. Now she was surrounded by love, working on a ranch that was as much hers as Wade's, raising a son with a man who cherished her. One evening in early summer, after James was asleep and the ranch work was done, Zara and Wade sat on the porch of their new house. It was larger than the old cabin, with multiple bedrooms and a real kitchen, built to last for generations. From the porch, they could see across their land, watching the sun paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "You ever think about that day in Fargo?" Zara asked. "When you bought my freedom?" "Every day," Wade admitted. "It was the best decision I ever made, the best $500 I ever spent." "I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you had not been there," Zara said quietly. "Who I would have become if I would have survived." Wade took her hand. "You would have survived. You are the strongest person I know, but I am grateful I was there, grateful I got to be the one to break those chains." "You did more than break chains," Zara said. "You showed me that I was worth saving, that I deserved kindness and respect and love. You gave me back my faith in humanity." "You did the same for me," Wade said. "I was so closed off before you, so focused on just getting through each day. You taught me how to live again, how to hope and dream and love." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out one by one. Inside, James made a small sound in his sleep but did not wake. The horses moved quietly in the corral. In the distance, a coyote called out and another answered. "I want more," Zara said suddenly. Wade looked at her in surprise. "More what? Children. I want more children with you. I want this house filled with noise and laughter and life. I want to build something that lasts beyond us." A slow smile spread across Wade's face. "How many more?" "As many as we are blessed with," Zara said. 2, 3, 4. I want a big family." "Then that is what we will have," Wade said, pulling her close. "I will give you everything you want, Zara, anything in my power to give." "I already have everything I want," she said. "I have you, I have James, I have this life we have built together. Everything else is just a bonus." Wade kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Zara Smith, more than words could ever express." "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for seeing me that day. For looking past the chains and the dirt and the fear to see who I really was. Thank you for giving me the chance to become this person." "You were always this person," Wade said. "Strong and brave and beautiful. I just helped you remember." Over the next few years, their family grew. Zara gave birth to a daughter they named Grace, who had her mother's green eyes and her father's stubborn determination. 2 years later came twin boys, Matthew and Marcus, who kept everyone running from dawn to dusk with their boundless energy. The ranch grew too, with new buildings and increased herds, becoming one of the most successful operations in the territory. Tom eventually retired and built a small house on the edge of the property, refusing to leave the place he had helped build. Miguel married a woman from town and brought her to live on the ranch, where they started their own family. Pete proved to have a talent for training horses and became invaluable to the operation. Through it all, Wade and Zara remained the center, the heart of everything. They worked side by side, raised their children together, and never lost the sense of wonder at having found each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Wade took Zara back to Fargo. She had not been back to town since the day of their wedding, and she was nervous about returning to the place where her nightmare had begun. But Fargo had changed. The old auction platform was gone, torn down years ago when the territory passed laws banning the practice. Gunderson was still in prison, and the town had elected a new sheriff who actually enforced the laws protecting the vulnerable. Wade led her to the general store and bought her an expensive new dress, insisting she deserved to be spoiled. Then they went to a photographer's studio, a new addition to the town, and had their portrait taken. Zara wore her new dress and the shawl Wade had bought her at the Harvest Festival all those years ago. Wade wore his best suit, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Why are we doing this?" Zara asked as the photographer positioned them. "Because I want our grandchildren to see how beautiful you were," Wade said. "How happy we were. I want proof that this life we built is real." The photographer captured them standing close together, Wade's hand on Zara's waist, both of them looking at each other instead of the camera. It was not the traditional portrait pose, but the photographer did not complain. He said it was the most genuine picture he had ever taken. That night, they stayed at the hotel, their first night away from the children since James was born. They made love slowly, tenderly, rediscovering each other without the constant demands of parenthood and ranch work. Afterward, lying tangled together in the hotel bed, Zara felt a deep sense of contentment. "What are you thinking?" Wade asked, a question that had become their ritual over the years. "That I would not change anything," Zara said. "Not a single moment, not even the hard parts. Because all of it led me here to you, to this life. I would change one thing," Wade said quietly. "What? I would have found you sooner, saved you from more pain." Zara turned to face him, cupping his cheek with her hand. "If you had found me sooner, I might not have been ready for you. I might not have appreciated what you were offering. Everything happened exactly as it needed to happen." Wade kissed her palm. "You are probably right. You usually are," she laughed. "I am definitely right. Now go to sleep. We have a long ride back to the ranch tomorrow, and 4 children who are probably driving Tom insane." As she drifted off to sleep in Wade's arms, safe and loved and content, Zara thought about the girl she had been, standing on that auction block in chains. That girl had been broken but not defeated, scared but still fighting. She had survived the worst thing she could imagine and had come out stronger on the other side, and she had found love, real love, the kind that built homes and families and futures, the kind that lasted. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the growing children. James grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved the ranch as much as his father did. Grace was wild and free-spirited, always bringing home injured animals to nurse back to health. The twins were inseparable, constantly getting into trouble together. Wade taught all of them to ride, to rope, to read the land and the sky. Zara taught them to read and write, to cook and clean, to treat everyone with respect regardless of their station. Together, they created a home filled with love and laughter, and the occasional chaos that came with 4 energetic children. When James turned 18, tall and strong and so much like his father that it sometimes took Zara's breath away, he announced that he wanted to expand the ranch's horse breeding operation. Wade could not have been more proud, and he threw himself into helping his son achieve his dream. Grace, at 16, surprised everyone by declaring she wanted to be a doctor. It was an unusual ambition for a young woman, but Wade and Zara had always encouraged their children to pursue their passions. They began saving money to send her to medical school back east. The twins, now 14 and as mischievous as ever, were still figuring out their paths. But they were good boys with kind hearts, and Zara knew they would find their way. On a warm summer evening when Wade was 50 and Zara was 45, they sat on the porch of their house, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. James had married a sweet girl named Emily, and they had 2 children of their own. The sound of children's laughter filled the air, mixing with the lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the grass. "We did good," Wade said, reaching for Zara's hand. "We did," she agreed. "Better than good." "You know what the best part is?" Wade asked. "What? We are not done yet. We still have years ahead of us, more memories to make, more moments to share." Zara squeezed his hand. "I cannot wait." As the sun set over the prairie, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Zara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the horror of the auction block to the joy of this moment, surrounded by family and love. It had not always been easy. There had been hard years, crop failures, brutal winters, and the everyday struggles of building a life on the frontier. But through it all, she had Wade by her side. The man who had broken her chains and offered her freedom and love. The man who had seen her at her lowest point and had chosen to lift her up rather than take advantage. The man who had spent every day of the past 20-plus years proving that love was not something to be earned or bought, but something to be freely given and gratefully received. "What are you thinking about?" Wade asked, bringing her hand to his lips. "Everything," she said. "Our whole life together, how grateful I am." "I am the grateful one," Wade said. "You took a chance on a cowboy who barely knew how to express his feelings. You built this life with me, raised our children, created this home. I am the luckiest man alive." "We are both lucky," Zara said. "Lucky we found each other. Lucky we had the courage to love." As darkness fell and the children were called inside, Wade pulled Zara to her feet. "Dance with me." "There is no music," she pointed out. "We will make our own." So they danced on the porch under the stars, moving slowly to a rhythm only they could hear. It was not so different from that first dance at the Harvest Festival all those years ago, when Wade had been stiff and uncertain and Zara had been falling in love. They were older now, with gray in their hair and lines on their faces, but the love between them had only grown stronger with time. "I love you, Zara Smith," Wade whispered in her ear. "Yesterday, today, and all the tomorrows we have left." "I love you too," she whispered back. "Forever and always." They continued to dance as the moon rose over the prairie. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and had built something beautiful together. A marriage, a family, a legacy. And when they finally went inside hand in hand, it was with the knowledge that they had everything they needed. They had each other, and that would always be enough. Years later, when they were both old and their children had children of their own, people would ask Zara about her life. They would want to know how she had survived being trafficked and sold, how she had built such a successful ranch, how she had raised such remarkable children. And she would smile and say, "I met a man who showed me that freedom was not just the absence of chains, but the presence of love." Everything else followed from that, Wade would add, "and I met a woman who taught me that love was not something to fear, but something to embrace with your whole heart. She saved me just as much as I saved her." Then they would look at each other with the same warmth and affection they had shared for more than 40 years, and everyone who saw them would know they were witnessing something rare and precious. True love, the kind that lasted a lifetime. On Wade's 75th birthday, surrounded by children and grandchildren and even a few great-grandchildren, he stood up to make a speech. His voice was still strong despite his age, and everyone fell silent to listen. "I have lived a long life," he said. "I have seen good times and bad, success and failure, joy and sorrow. But the best decision I ever made, the thing I am most proud of, was spending $500 on a woman in chains in Fargo 47 years ago." Everyone laughed, including Zara, who wiped tears from her eyes. "She was fierce even then," Wade continued. "Angry and scared but unbroken. I knew in that moment that I wanted to know her, to help her, to be near her. I did not know I was falling in love. I just knew she mattered." He walked over to where Zara sat and took her hand. "And every day since then has proven me right. She matters. She has always mattered. She is the best part of me, the reason for everything good in my life. And I thank God every day that I was in the right place at the right time to break those chains." "You did not just break chains," Zara said, standing up to face him. "You broke the darkness that surrounded me. You showed me light and hope and love. You gave me a reason to fight, to survive, to thrive. And I would go through it all again, every terrible moment, if I knew it would lead me back to you." They kissed then, to the cheers and applause of their family. And in that moment, surrounded by the people they had created together, the legacy they had built, they were exactly where they were meant to be. As the years continued on, as they grew older and time inevitably slowed them down, Wade and Zara never lost their connection. When Wade's hands grew too stiff with arthritis to do all the ranch work he once did, Zara was there to help him button his shirts and saddle his horse. When Zara's eyes began to fail and reading became difficult, Wade would read to her every evening, his voice as steady and comforting as it had been when they were young. They spent their final years sitting on that same porch, watching their legacy unfold before them. The ranch was now run by James and his sons, with help from the twins and their families. Grace had become a respected doctor, running a practice in Fargo where she treated everyone regardless of their ability to pay. All of their children and grandchildren had inherited their values of hard work, kindness, and the fundamental belief that every person deserved dignity and respect. Wade passed first, on a cold January morning when he was 82. He died peacefully in his sleep, with Zara beside him holding his hand. His last words to her were, "Thank you for the adventure." Zara grieved deeply, but not without gratitude. They had been given more years together than most couples ever received, and every one of those years had been filled with love. She continued to live at the ranch, surrounded by family, telling stories about Wade to the great-grandchildren who had never known him. When her own time came 3 years later, she went with a smile on her face. Her last conscious thought was of a young cowboy with kind blue eyes, offering her water from a canteen and a chance at a new life. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names, the dates of their lives, and a single inscription that James had chosen. She was bound, he freed her, and together they built a legacy of love. The ranch continued on for generations, always in the family, always holding to the values Wade and Zara had established. Their story became legend in the territory, then the state, a tale of love conquering adversity, of one person's choice to do good changing the course of multiple lives. And on clear nights, when the wind whispered through the grass and the stars shone bright over the prairie, some swore they could still see two figures dancing on the porch of the old ranch house, moving to music only they could hear, forever young and forever in love.